going to try and turn this on without knocking the damn thing off, because the previous video that I've just done, I ended up pressing stop and the whole thing went flip, because it's not actually being held in on the tripod. Tripod, iPad tripod. That's what, yeah. Anyway, so you might have remembered me doing a few American whiskies from a company called TerraPure, who were based in North Carolina. And this was a company that were using, oh God, what was it? It was oxidization and energy something to speed up the aging process of their whiskey. And what I've got here is a company called Cleveland, who, funnily enough, are based in Cleveland, which are also claiming to be able to speed up the maturation process of their whiskies. So this was created by a guy called Tom Licks, and Tom Licks looks like this. Tom Licks looks like this. He was in the Navy, and apparently one of his commanders who he worked for was actually kind of making an illicit hooch, and supposedly that's what got him interested in spirits. But he then was left the Navy and became essentially an entrepreneur within the software industry before moving into whiskey. Now, he is quoted as saying that the Cleveland Whiskey Company are not a micro distillery, they're not a craft distillery, they're a technology company. And what they claim to do, and this is actually on their website, they use, what was the word they used? Disruptive technology. That's their term, to increase maturation speed up the maturation process of their whiskies. It's in Forbes and various other kind of business magazines in terms of, this guy can, make a 8-year-old bourbon in a week type thing, and he can mature bourbon in a day and all of this sort of stuff. So what he's doing is, now what I don't know is whether they are actually distilling themselves. I don't think they are, because of all the stuff I read, there was nothing about them actually distilling. It all was talking about their maturation process and not about how they were making the spirit in the first place. So I have a feeling he is sourcing it. I think that's what they're doing. I could be completely wrong. I'm happy for somebody to put me wrong in the comments. If that's the case, fair enough. But I didn't read anything about their actual distilling process, what they were doing, what they were using. It was all about, they are making this whiskey, and I don't think it was even bourbon, it was whiskey, that is matured in a cask for 6 months. They then transfer that spirit into a sealed tank. They chop up the cask, they put it in that tank, they seal it airtight, and then it's like a pressure cooker. And they change the pressure so it pressurizes into the wood and then comes out again, and into the wood and comes out again. TerraPure are doing something fairly similar, if not exactly the same thing. But the claim is that essentially Tom Licks looked at whiskies maturing in a barrel, and there are craft distillers out there that will use smaller barrels. Hudson Baby Bourbon was one where they had smaller barrels, they piled them up, and then they were using bass speakers, playing music through speakers to agitate the whiskey so it was interacting with the wood. So the argument is, if you use smaller casks, you've got more whiskey per barrel interacting with wood, so therefore you're getting more of a maturation, because that's where it gets its flavour. That's how whiskey matures in a cask, is it's about the interaction on the edge, the inside of the barrel of the whiskey going into the wood, pulling out the flavours, going back, soaking into the wood, pulling out flavours, and that interaction is what does it. So if you can increase that, if you can chop up the barrels and you put the barrels in the whiskey itself, and then force it into the wood now again by pressurising it, theoretically, you're maximising all the flavour without having to sit there for 6, 8, 10 years for it to do exactly the same thing. That's the theory behind it. It's agitating a lot of people in the industry. TerraPure was certainly not getting any favourable comments from anybody in the Kentucky bourbon industry. Cleveland seemed to be doing exactly the same thing. From what I've read of him and a few reviews and a few quotes, he does not give a toss. He's just going to go, I'm going to let the market decide, and they're selling lots of this. Now, what they're also doing, and this is what I've been sent from Jason Staver, who sent me these American samples, is they are doing wood finishes, but these are woods that are, it's like it's like a flavoured whiskey, but they're flavouring it with wood. So this particular one is black cherry. Now, when he said, I'm going to send you some Cleveland Underground black cherry, I was like, I don't really want to do flavoured whiskies. I know I did the Bonnie Rose, but that was because I had it and it was an excuse to open it up. But I don't want to do flavoured whiskies. This technically isn't flavoured. It's not had black cherry flavouring added to it. It's black cherry wood. What they've done is they've added that in black cherry wood chunks into this pressure cooker, essentially, and that's what they're taking the flavour from. So they're using apple wood. I think there's a maple wood. There's a couple of other ones as well, which supposedly are imparting some flavour, but the flavour's from the wood. It's not like they're putting in some kind of flavouring element and going, right, there you go, there's some cherry compote and it's going to taste of cherry. So I'm very, very intrigued to know what this tastes like. I'd be intrigued to try the regular Cleveland, because, and I've seen a couple of different versions of this. This is down as Cleveland Underground Black Cherry, so this is what the bottle looks like. But I think they also call it the Cleveland Uncommon Whiskies, and these are their wood flavours as well. So it's essentially one and the same. I don't know whether they've kind of changed the branding of it, but it's quite a dark colour, considering this probably isn't even a year. This is probably 6 months and then a couple of weeks in this wood, but it's pulled out all the colour and the flavour from this wood with this pressurisation. Yeah. So I'm really intrigued, and I'd like to try their ordinary one just to compare that as a straight whiskey to all the others. They're not calling it bourbon or anything like that, so I've no idea what the mash bill is. But this is quite sharp. It's really quite spirity. There's not a great deal else apart from, and this is 47% as well. In fact, I thought I'd read it at 90 proof, which is essentially 45, so it might be a slight difference in terms of the bottling. But it's quite spirity and not a lot else. It's very, very clean, but it's a clean alcohol smell. Not picking up a lot much else than that. Okay, let's give it a go. Now it starts off with a really rich mouthfeel. Really rich. Almost liqueur-y. And there isn't the merest hint of black cherry. I'm not a massive cherry fan, but it's there and it's very, very subtle. It's almost like you catch it right at the end. It's like, oh, wait a minute, I taste cherry. Because I was looking for it to start with and it wasn't really there. I'm going to guess it's quite rye heavy. It reminds me of rye whiskies rather than bourbons, but I am actually picking up more of the cherry now. There is a dark cherry sweetness to it. It's not massively rich. And to be honest, without that, it would be a little bit rough and a little bit lacking in something. But it doesn't taste like a flavoured whiskey. That's the good thing about it. It doesn't taste like the Bonnie Rose was, this is orange, and a lot of flavoured whiskies you get. There's this, was it Jim Beam apple, and there's a maple, and Jack Daniel's honey, and it's just like, concentrated honey shoved in the bowl. There you go. There's your Jim Beam. This is so. It is flavoured. You can taste black cherry on it, but you've got to look for it. Once you find it, it's there, but you've got to look for it, and it's not obvious that it's a black cherry. There's that term, can't unsee. Once you see something, you can't unsee it. And once you taste this, once you get the black cherry, you can't untaste the black cherry. But it's still subtle, delicate, and it actually lifts. I think without the black cherry, it would be pretty bland and not particularly great, almost a little unbalanced, because there is a bit of a kick at the end. And without that black cherry element, it would be quite a thin whiskey with a bit of spiritiness to it. Not particularly great. That black cherry wood is just giving it enough to make it actually really pleasant. And this, I'm somebody that doesn't really like cherries. To be honest, I think I prefer black cherries to regular cherries just because they're not quite as sharp. There's a bit more depth to a black cherry, but even then, I wouldn't choose to have one. But this actually works really well. I am really surprised with this. Couldn't find this in the UK for sale. Did find it in the US in a couple of places online. $40, $45, which for something so young seems quite expensive. But to be honest, for something unusual, and I don't think I'd want to try the maple. I think that's going to be too sweet. I don't think I'd want to try the apple because I just can't see that going. I actually think this is a really good combination. This works really well. The very, very subtle sweet black cherry, and then an okay whiskey. It's like good black cherry flavour is lifting an alright whiskey to something that's actually pretty decent. And if I found that for $43, if I found it for $40, I'd be very tempted to pick up a bottle, just to then share it with whiskey drinkers that are just looking for something a little bit different and a bit unusual. I'm not convinced about their processes. I think the underlying core whiskey of this isn't brilliant, and if that's what their regular version's like, then yeah, I'm not sure their processes are actually doing any benefit. But this black cherry wood is actually unusual, different, and I think will surprise a lot of people. Jason, thank you very much for that. That was very, very interesting indeed. Right, it is time for me to do some editing on an iPod even, so I think this is going to really test my eyesight, and I shall see you at the next one. Cheers!